Have you ever stopped to think about the quieter figures behind history? Not the big names we all know, but the people working away, carefully saving the whispers of dissent, making sure radical ideas, the fight for freedom, aren't just lost. Today, you and I are diving deep into the world of one such person, John Couzin. He spent his life safeguarding what he called the archives of dissent in Glasgow. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is really to get to grips with Couzin's incredible dedication. We'll focus on his interest in people like Guy Aldred, who absolutely embodied this spirit of revolt, and through Aldred we even get a glimpse of earlier radicals like Richard Carlile. These histories, often described as fugitive and scattered, they're hard to find, sure, but they're vital. They show us unfiltered resistance, stories usually just wiped from the official records. So let's unpack this. We're looking at someone who saw history in, well, small pamphlets and brave stands.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how John Couzin's work lets us connect the dots. You know, between these different moments of resistance, you see how relevant they still are. His work with the Spirit of Revolt Archive, it wasn't just about storing old papers. It was about making these powerful, often ignored stories accessible, making sure those fights for free speech, for social justice still resonate today.
So John Couzin, 1934 to 2025, a key figure in preserving Scotland's radical past. His recent passing, which of course we acknowledge, has brought fresh eyes to his work, especially with the Spirit of Revolt Archive. It really stands as a tribute. But tell us, what is an archive of dissent? And how hard is it to actually build something like that?
That's a really good question. So the Spirit of Revolt Archive, it collects what's called autonomous protest literature. Think leaflets, underground papers, zines, manifestos, stuff like that. It's not what you typically find in a main library. Ian Heavens, who studied the anarchist movement, he described these sources as extremely fugitive and scattered, and that's spot on. They were often self-published, maybe small print runs, passed around quickly, sometimes secretly. They were meant to be, well, temporary. Read, passed on, maybe even destroyed. Couzin's real insight was seeing these fragments as crucial. He didn't just collect, he hunted for them, saved them, connected people. He knew these seemingly small pieces were the actual pulse of a movement. His dedication in piecing it all together is quite something.
Wow. It sounds almost like digging for treasure, but for ideas. And it wasn't just about the paper itself, was it? Couzin seemed to really get the spirit behind them. He had this powerful way of looking at protest literature. He said, poems can often capture a moment in history with clarity and emotion. They allow us to paint a very graphic picture of our hopes and dreams, that world where justice reigns. He saw more than just words.
Absolutely. That quote just perfectly shows his deep interest in that very spirit of revolt, the spirit that drove the people whose work he collected. He got that protest literature isn't just facts, it's emotion. It shows the raw hopes, the struggles of people right there on the ground. It gives you this unique window into the human side of these movements.
And Couzin wasn't just an observer, right? He was part of this tradition himself. He even self-published poetry and political history through his own Bakunin Press. Bakunin Press, named after the Russian anarchist Bakunin. That itself tells you something about his leanings, doesn't it? This active role must have shaped how he saw the archive. He also co-curated the Radical Presses Clydeside exhibition back in January 2013, which is a big part of what we're drawing on today. How did that personal connection, being active himself, affect his view?
Oh, it's vital. Being involved himself gave him this built-in empathy. He understood the effort, the risk, the sheer passion involved in putting out a pamphlet or a poem when you're challenging things. He wasn't just looking from the outside. He was, you could say, a kindred spirit. And that sharpened his focus on what Kropotkin meant about those small pamphlets and newspapers. Kropotkin said they showed, for the poor, the degree to which men and women are imbued with the new theories, their readiness to carry them out in their daily life and to suffer for them. Couzin knew these weren't just old bits of paper. They were living proof of courage, real conviction.
Right. And it's exactly those kinds of voices, those sparks, that led Couzin to meticulously document the life of Guy Aldred, someone he clearly saw as a living example of this spirit of revolt. Okay, so let's turn to Aldred now. What was it about him that Couzin found so compelling?
Well, Guy Aldred, born 1886, died 1963. He was an anarchist communist, advocating for, a stateless society, communal ownership, voluntary association. And he was just incredibly prolific. His whole life was about unwavering principles, relentless activism. Couzin chronicled him extensively, seeing him as this crucial link in the chain of radical thought and action, especially in Scotland. Aldred didn't just talk the talk, he published.
He certainly did. He set up his own press, the Bakunin Press, named after Mikhail Bakunin, the Russian anarchist, another big clue there on 1905. Started in his mom's basement in London, apparently. Then he brought it to Glasgow, ran it there between 1912 and 1919. What was Bakunin Press really focused on?
It had a very clear focus: anti-militarism and absolute freedom of the press. That was it. Through Bakunin Press, Aldred put out loads of pamphlets and books getting these messages out there. And here's where we see that fascinating link back to earlier radicals that Couzin admired so much. Aldred's Bakunin Press published a work called Richard Carlile in 1912.
Richard Carlile. That's a name maybe not everyone knows, but hugely important, right?
Ah.
Early 19th century English radical, fought nonstop for press freedom against blasphemy laws. So, by publishing Carlile, Aldred wasn't just sharing history. He was deliberately linking his own fight to this powerful tradition of dissent. That really highlights Cousin's interest in tracing these connections, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows Aldred consciously drawing strength, legitimacy even, from those who came before, framing his own work within this long history of challenging authority. And besides Carlile, Bakunin Press published Aldred's own stuff too, like At Grips with War in 1929. That included the famous Workers' Pledge in Times of War, basically asking people, war, what for? Plus, he edited 5 different anarchist papers in Glasgow: the Herald of Revolt, the Spur, the Commune, the Council, and the Word. It wasn't just about writing, it was about building platforms, creating a whole space for these urgent ideas.
But to really get Aldred's spirit of revolt, we need to talk about his famous battle for free speech on Glasgow Green. That seems like a defining moment. And John Couzin himself wrote about it in detail, didn't he? His 2006 paper. Can you sort of paint a picture for us? What made this struggle so crucial, so dramatic?
Oh, it was a real David and Goliath fight. It kicked off with this restrictive bylaw, number 20, that the Glasgow Corporation, the City Council, passed in April 1916. It replaced an older rule, but really clamped down on free assembly in public parks, especially Glasgow Green, which was, the traditional spot for public meetings and protests. They didn't enforce it right away, but by 1922, it was causing real trouble. And that set the stage for Aldred to step in.
And he didn't just step in quietly, I imagine.
Not a chance. July 1924, he uses his paper, The Commune, to publish this open letter, straight to the Lord Provost and the Council. He boldly declared the unlicensed liberty of free speech on Glasgow Green secured by long tradition. Then he backed it up by organizing a huge meeting, 70 speakers, basically daring the authorities to stop him. It was a direct challenge, a public call to defend free speech.
And his commitment wasn't just limited to Glasgow, was it? Sounds like he was fighting everywhere.
Exactly. There's this dramatic little side story. While the Glasgow Green fight is heating up, February 1925, Aldred gets arrested off his platform in Hyde Park, London, charged with blasphemy and sedition. It just shows his unwavering commitment to free expression wherever he was, whatever the specific fight.
So back in Glasgow, he keeps pushing against Bylaw 20. March 1927, he goes to court himself to argue against it, quoting laws, historical precedents, saying the corporation was overstepping its bounds. He even pointed out, look, London has its problems, but they allow meetings in Hyde Park. Why is Glasgow cracking down? Must have been powerful, even if frustrating in the end.
It was. But despite his arguments, the sheriff confirmed the bylaw in April 1927. The Daily Herald ran that headline, Glasgow Green silent. Imagine seeing that. It must have felt like a real gut punch to free speech advocates, a huge defeat. But how long could that spirit really stay silent,
Not long, apparently. Yeah. June 1931, things flare up again. This time with the arrival of the tramp preachers, the Brotherhood of the Way. These weren't your usual activists, were they? Picture it. These fervent guys with wooden crosses preaching on the green. Apparently, they often welcomed getting arrested just to get food and shelter, singing hymns in court. Even John McGovern, an MP from the Independent Labour Party, got involved, got himself thrown out of Parliament for pushing the issue.
Sounds like pure street theater.
It was quite a spectacle, and it definitely got attention. But amidst all this, riots breaking out in October 1931, Guy Aldred's principles really shone through. He held his own meeting on the Green, October 5th, and according to Cousin's research, he sternly rebuked McGovern and McShane for stirring up the people with no other purpose than to appear to be their leader and further their own personal agenda. It shows his commitment to the cause, not just jumping on a bandwagon or exploiting chaos for personal gain. He stuck to his principles. And eventually, all that struggle, that determined, courageous fight by Aldred and others, it paid off. March 1932, the Parks Committee finally repeals Bylaw 20. An amended version comes in June, restoring the right to hold meetings, sell literature, take collections, but in designated areas on the Green. A hard-won battle then.
Absolutely monumental. But here's a crucial point. Aldred insisted the new rule should apply to every park in the city, not just designated spots. That really highlights his unwavering commitment to the principle of free assembly everywhere. It wasn't just about that one patch of grass. It was about the universal right to speak freely in public. He wasn't happy with a compromise if the core principle wasn't fully recognized.
Right. Aldred's story, which John Couzin brought to light so well, it's just one powerful thread in this wider spirit of revolt that Couzin dedicated himself to archiving. That radical Presses Clydeside exhibition, for example, it showcased all sorts of voices who shared that spirit. Who else was featured?
Oh, people like Voltairine de Cleyre, the American anarchist. Her poem, The Gods and the People, spoke of a world with no master, high or low, challenging all authority. Or Lily Gare Wilkinson, who actually critiqued women's suffrage, arguing, to vote is to register assent to being ruled. She pushed for deeper systemic change, looking beyond just getting the vote.
And not just individuals either. The exhibition also included William Gallagher, jailed for anti-war views under the Defense of the Realm Act, that wartime law suppressing dissent. And it even looked back to the 18th century Glasgow cotton weavers, leaderless strikers whose tactics, the sources say, kind of anticipated syndicalism workers controlling industry way ahead of time. These are exactly the hidden histories Couzin championed.
And what ties all these examples together is the power of those radical presses, those small books, pamphlets, and leaflets from independent, autonomous presses. Couzin believed this tradition directly influences us today, helping us, as William Morris said ages ago, to build a better life for all. Cousin's legacy, then, isn't just about saving old documents. It's about giving us the tools to understand how dissent works and why rights like free speech aren't guaranteed. They're like muscles you have to keep exercising them.
So what does all this mean for us, for you, listening now, navigating our own world, flooded with information, sometimes chaos? It really feels like John Couzin didn't just document history. He saved the tools, the stories that empower dissent. He understood, like the Glasgow Green fight shows us, that these rights we maybe take for granted, these freedoms, they have to be vigilantly guarded or they disappear. His work is this powerful reminder that the fight for free speech, for assembly, it's never really won. It needs constant vigilance, the courage to challenge things, just like Aldred did. And that brings us toward the end of this deep dive. John Couzin's work, his focus on Guy Aldred, the connection back to Carlyle, it all speaks to this enduring spirit of revolt, this relentless push for free speech, the guts to stand up to authority. The stories Couzin saved Aldred on Glasgow Green, the poets, the publishers, they remind us. True knowledge isn't just what happened, but why it mattered, and how those fights still shape our freedoms today. What really stands out to you about that idea, that the right to speak freely must always be vigilantly guarded? Something to think about.